Coming into version 3 of Honkai Star Rail, and this time at the very beginning of the version, we have the newest path and element for the Trailblazer, Ice Element Remembrance. But unlike the typical Remembrance stuff we're used to like freezing enemies and whatnot, the actual path itself is predicated on summons, resulting in a ton of questions about their place in the meta, seeing as over the past 2 years we've been focused on the 7 paths we have now. We're scheduled to receive Aglia later in the version, which means for the time being we have the Remembrance Trailblazer to work with. Following the meta success and relevance of Harmony Trailblazer, players are very excited to see what the new path will bring. So for today I wanted to give a detailed analysis of their abilities, their performance in relation to other characters of the same niche, and also clarify how they work, because I'm sure many of you guys also want to know the mechanics of Memosprites. For the uninitiated, Memosprites are essentially the formal term for pets in this game, behaving identically to summons, except they consist of an actual entity that can be interacted with by both players and enemies. So unlike Nambi, Fuyuan, and the Lightning Lord, Memosprite Mem is basically a 5th party member with its own health bar, speed, abilities, and so on. Now, while Mem operates independently from Remembrance Trailblazer, all of the latter's abilities exist purely to facilitate the former, which you can see through their action commands. RMC's skill has them call out Mem. If Mem's already on the field though, it restores a portion of health and gains 10% charge, more on that later. RMC's ultimate also summons Mem and gives them an extra 40% charge before having Mem attack all enemies on field. It should be noted that unlike other summons up until this point, while this is indeed an attack from a summoned entity, it's not a follow-up attack. In case you're wondering when a summon attack is or isn't a follow-up, it will specifically mention in the ability description. RMC's talent also pertains to Mem, identifying their base speed and health pool while also stating that anytime 10 energy is generated across the team, Mem gains 1% charge. If we take say Argenti and fill up his ultimate gauge to full, that's 18% charge for Mem given Argenti has an ultimate cost of 180. What is charge used for? Charge is related to Mem's own passive. Yes, summons have their own talent passive. All allies gain a passive crit damage buff based on Mem's own crit damage, identical to the crit damage buffs you see on Sparkle, Bronya, and Sunday. It just so happens Mem is in the same line of work as it too has a turn advance. During Mem's turn, if it's not at 100% charge, it will automatically dish out its attack skill and gain a bit of charge. But when Mems have full charge, it gets stacked immediately and allow to turn advance one party member, granting them a buff wherein they basically deal up to an extra 30% bonus true damage on their attacks for 3 turns. So say the character does 100 damage, Mem will tack on 20% more true damage or 30% in E5 on top of that. Mem can also technically use the buff on itself to give itself the bonus true damage, but it doesn't take an expert to know that there are far better candidates to use this buff on since Mem only gains a DPS buff, not the turn advance. That's basically the gist of it. During Mem's turn, it just mindlessly attacks enemies, and then every time it's at max charge, it turn advances itself to then turn advance someone else and give them a big buff. And the whole point of the Trailblazer is to speed up Mem's rate of charge. We should quickly talk about their passive traces, as one in particular is highly influential towards who you want to go after. The other two are meant to help out Mem with getting more charge, but the magnets and long chains trace is the one I'm talking about. The bonus true damage buff that Mem gives to your party member increases based on their maximum energy capacity, which means the higher their energy cost, the more bonus true damage they get. To get the full bonus, the character you're buffing has to have an ultimate cost of at least 200, meaning at present, Yunli and Madame Herta are the only 2 characters who can obtain the full 50% true damage buff from Mem. That's not to say you can't use Mem for those under 200 energy, but it does bring to focus an interesting thought. Ultimate-centric units typically fall in the realm of the hypercarry niche, which has been regarded by many as the least relevant archetype in Honkai Star Rail compared to follow-up and break parties. While RMC is capable of buffing the entire team through Mem's passive crit damage boost, the extra true damage bonus it gives can be the X factor in pushing more value into personal damage. You might recall in my videos on Lunai Danheng and Jingliu that their personal mechanics not being compatible with any combat engine makes it difficult for them to keep up with the push towards archetype-focused gameplay. This is one such way to alleviate that pressure. On that note, there's even more personal DPS added to the mix with their Eidolons. U1 has Mem give an extra 10% bonus crit rate to whomever has a true damage buff. And just to account for the inevitability of Mem buffing another summoner, they also echo the 10% crit rate on both the summon and the summoner. Crit damage is a dime a dozen in this day and age, but few characters intrinsically provide crit rate, which as you know is imperative to max out for any hypercarry. Being a freely accessible unit, Remembrance Trailblazer tries to focus on covering as many bases as possible. It can do a bit of damage through ultimate and Mem's own attack. The crit damage buff applying to the entire team opens up some room for multi-carry formats. Turn advancing is good for single carries of course, and then, most notably, the way the true damage buff is designed makes it so it applies to any instance of damage. This allows RMC a bit of leg room in buffing other forms of damage like break and dot, in addition to personal damage. Although you should realistically never use them for break since you can just use Harmony MC for that. a significant departure from Harmony Trailblazer being only for break teams, which I personally appreciate since at a base level, Remembrance Trailblazer can be a serviceable addition to any team regardless of account, which brings me to the main point of the video. From a free-to-play or budget player perspective, RMC is by far one of the best characters in the game. They might even be in contention for the best free-to-play character at the moment. Despite being Remembrance, they're about as close to Harmony as you can get, so in application you can basically consider them a glorified Harmony support that can do a small bit of damage on the side, kind of like Robin. It's a fantastic direction to take for a character everyone will have access to, and going on the basis of necessity, a turn advancer is definitely the best one you can ask for in a turn-based game. It's the same principle behind Bronya being one of the most sought-after characters in StarL back in version 1. Now, I'm sure the burning question on many of your minds is how does RMC stack up against the turn advancer supports we have already? To say they're attempting to reinvent the wheel would be an understatement. We're swimming in a plethora of turn advanced crit damage boosting supports as it is. What do they do specifically that can make them either better or worse than the likes of Bronya, Sparkle, Robin, and Sunday? By extension, what makes them better than other Harmony supports like Renmei, or better yet, their own Harmony version? Because remember, if you use one, you can't use the other until you switch, which calls opportunity cost into question. It wasn't that big of a deal for Physical and Fire Trailblazer since, well, you know. But now we're choosing between two very useful and very integral support characters, one who will be part of the new Summoner archetype, and one who's quite literally a must-have for any player who didn't pull Fugue. Let's first begin with RMC vs HMC. Evidently the two are not in direct competition with each other, but it's still worth mentioning. There's a non-zero chance you'll be pressured to field a break team on one side of MOC, Pure Fiction, or APOC, and if you don't have Fugue, Harmony Trailblazer is the only way to enable a super break party, making them practically compulsory. Seeing as there's only one alternative for break teams, while on the other hand you have quite the varied selection of turn advanced crit boosters, Harmony Trailblazer appears to be the more important one to prioritize. That said, you're free to switch between the two anytime you want, so you can pick and choose depending on what the situation calls for. But if in the event you're forced to choose between one or the other, I think HMC carries a bit more presence. On the other hand, RMC is going to be used more often due to them having more general usability, so basically stick to RMC as your default and switch to HMC as needed. On to RMC versus the other Harmony supports. Context always matters and everyone has their own specialty, but based on preliminary calculations you'll be happy to know that the buffing capabilities of Mem are on par with, if not better than E0S0 Robin, Sunday, and especially Bronya and Sparkle. Not by like a massive margin, I'm not saying you should dump the other characters. The reason Remembrance Trailblazer does so well is because, for one, their AoE crit damage boost is persistent and applies to the entire team. That's a big advantage they have over Bronya, who can only supply it through her ultimate. So while Bronya does give slightly more crit damage, not to mention the huge attack boost, RMC cleans her out in uptime, which in most people's eyes matters a lot more. Same applies to Sunday and Sparkle. They give way more crit damage, but it's only to one ally. 2. Their true damage bonus, assuming you have E6 RMC, is 30% at base, plus up to an additional 20% for a total of 50. For all intents and purposes, it's 50% bonus damage to a single ally for 3 turns. We're not talking a 4-star character power budget here. RMC has the same capacity as 5-star units. And then also remember they can actually attack. With E6, your ultimate's guaranteed to crit, and since you were going to build crit damage anyway, you can theoretically build damage on RMC and supplement your party's overall DPS that way. 3. Crit rate. Neither Bronya nor Sparkle offer additional crit rate to the party without light cone assistance. RMC provides 10% through E1. It's not Sunday's 20%, but it's still a benefit. If you want a very simple TLDR on how good RMC is in relation to the existing turn advances, they're basically as strong as the 5-star E0S0 supports, if not potentially slightly better depending on team comp. Obviously in Summoner teams, Sunday completely shits on everyone, and SP supplementation from Sparkle distinguishes her from her peers, but for a free character everyone's gonna have access to, it's a wonderful start. Free-to-plays and brand new players are gonna be making liberal use of Remembrance Trailblazer. However, there's one aspect to them that I'm sure many of you picked up on with RMC that can somewhat throw a wrench into things: the lack of consistency. While Sunday, Bronya, and Sparkle have turn advances available on demand and Robin has an AoE turn advance attached to her ultimate, making up for it not being available in all times, RMC's turn advance is tied to an involuntary activation, Mem reaching full charge. Funny, because in my Summoner video, I mentioned how this exact thing could be a possible downside for summons. While there are ways to accelerate Mem's charge, namely in the form of RMC's skill and ultimate, the main way you're going to build up its gauge is by gaining energy. This also includes energy you get from taking enemy hits, and as soon as you reach 100 points, Mem automatically forces a turn advance on your party member of choice. The problem is that it does this whether you're ready for it or not. This makes RMC the first character in Honkai Star that you actively cannot plan out in advance. I mean, technically you can argue Ting Chai with their shitty RNG or Yunli with their counterattacks, but it goes far beyond that with RMC. One of Mem's passives gives it 40% charge on the first summon instead of 10%. Combine that with Mem gaining 50% charge every time it gets summoned, as well as the 30% energy you generate by using RMC's skill, and Mem will start the battle at 93 charge. So roughly 2 more attacks or skills from your other party members, or 1 attack and then 1 of Mem's attacks will get you a turn advance. Realistically, you can plan out the first one, but for subsequent turn advances, you'll be at the mercy of circumstance, forcing you to plan out your actions on the fly compared to premeditating what to do on each turn. The involuntary access to Mem's turn advance is understandably a downside, as the vast number of ways to build up energy beyond attacking or using your skill make it hard to predict exactly when you're gonna get it. You generate energy upon getting hit and also even generate energy when using your ultimate. Granted, it's not too inconsistent to be impractical. Generally speaking, you can expect to pull a turn advance every 3 or 4 turns, which is not bad at all. It's just something that can potentially make them more unwieldy to play. What they might have been able to do is make it so Mem's turn advance behaves like an ultimate, where upon reaching full, you can sit on it for as long as you want until you feel like using it. Then again, a quick play turn advance would be pretty broken to say the least. Fortunately, there are a few ways to alleviate Mem's fickleness. First of which being your equipment, getting as much energy regeneration on RMC as possible, such as Fawn Whack or Penacony, and of course an energy rope can help out with building charge faster. Also, any character who can battery the team like Tingyun, Sunday, and Hoho can help you boost up energy too. You can also prioritize speed, as having more speed also means more charge, namely more uses of your skill to get 13 more points of charge every turn. So in practice, Remembrance Trailblazer being unable to turn advance on demand is a mild inconvenience at most. It's not enough to totally undermine the character's practical strength. Apart from that, one more thing to make note of is that while RMC does have a really high baseline performance, it's offset by them having a low ceiling, in that they're equal to E0 S0 Harmony supports, but as soon as they get E1 or S1 or higher, reasons to use them will begin to diminish. Being a Remembrance character and not Harmony, RMC is unable to take advantage of the myriad of overpowered light cones the Harmony class has at their disposal. The best weapon they have at the moment is, I believe, Victory in a Blink, which at S5 gives 24% bonus crit damage and 16% bonus damage to the target in Memosprite buffs. Admittedly, this is nowhere near the same type of power boost Harmony light cones afford. And being a free E6 character, RMC can only get so much stronger, where Sunday, Sparkle, Robin, and even Bronya have the potential to get stronger through higher levels of investment. Furthermore, in light of Remembrance having more open-ended gameplay connotations to their characters, it's unlikely for RMC to gain access to better light cone options pertaining to what they're trying to do in particular. Agli is going to be a DPS character, and we can likewise expect her signature weapon to also be predicated on DPS, therefore not being conducive to what RMC is trying to do. Perhaps in the future we might get another Remembrance character who is support oriented, but by that point, I'd imagine there's going to be a fair bit of power creep. The high floor and low ceiling of Remembrance Trailblazer is why earlier I said they're fantastic for free-to-plays who generally only make use of 5 stars at E0 S0. For higher investment players like E0 S1, E1 S1, E2 S1, so on and so forth, RMC is still a good character, but if your Sunday, Sparkle, and Robin are stacked, you can probably still keep Trailblazer as a Harmony character. That is until we get more characters from version 3 who then play more into summons. My overall thoughts on Remembrance Trailblazer can be summed up with one word: satisfied. I'm satisfied with the character. They're in a good position where they're strong enough to be a valuable addition to your team, especially if you're just starting out or you're a budget player who doesn't have the whole roster to work with, but at the same time they don't set the bar too impossibly high to where your existing party isn't that good anymore. In terms of teams, it's abundantly clear Hoyo wants us to play them alongside Madame Herda, as she's one of only 2 characters with a max energy capacity of over 200. Beyond that, I can also advise playing RMC with Yunli, who similarly has a big energy cost and also batteries herself a ton. They're also pretty good when working in conjunction with Argenti, as while he doesn't have 200 energy, 180 is close enough to get a big chunk of Mem's buff. Basically, anyone who plays with energy or anyone who doesn't care too much about hyper strict turn advancements can make great use of RMC. They're designed to be usable in a wide number of situations. Much as I'm concerned about the growing HP inflation of Honkai Star, I am glad they're giving us free characters with a strong baseline. RMC is a good unit and will no doubt be extremely helpful for us entering 3.0. Anyways, that's all I have for today. Let me know your thoughts on Trailblazer's new magical girl transformation in the comments down below, if you think they were well made or not. For now though, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Honkai Star discussions if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.